What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and let's talk. Let's sit back, and I don't know how long this video is going to go, so buckle yourselves in. Maybe you don't have to buckle yourselves in if it's a shorter video, but I want to talk about the state of the industry, and more than that, because we have talked about that, with each individual story. EA today, PlayStation yesterday, Deck 9 yesterday, Xbox, 1,900 people, right? It's bad. It's really bad. I'm not here... I do exaggerate, okay? It's like a personality thing, but I'm not here to clickbait or mislead. I want to make this more of like a prediction thing going forward. And I also don't want to come across as if the industry is completely screwed and like there's absolutely no hope. It's a sinking ship. You better get off. I do think there's a lot of talk about that. Truly. I mean, if you go online, you see a lot of that stuff. And I think a portion of the games industry is screwed. Screwed both now, as we're seeing, and screwed for the next 5 or so years. I really believe that, and we'll talk about that in this video. But the whole industry, no. I don't actually believe the entire industry is screwed. I think the industry needs a shift. I think certain things that we'll talk about need to happen, and the industry in 5 years from now is going to be very different than the industry is now, okay? So let's fill in the specifics. What do I mean? AAA is overwhelmingly, I believe personally, dying, okay? And when I say AAA, I am talking about these massive 200, 300, for whatever reason, 200, 300 plus $1 million budgets on these games that, yes, they're 50, 60, 70-hour games. Those are the games I believe, and those are the studios, and those are the companies that are dying. And we're seeing it over and over and over. Now, there's also like the live service bubble that's imploding, and we'll talk about that too. But this is where I kind of want to start. It's tragic, but it's also something that you could absolutely see coming. We say it time and time again, and there's no better person and there's no better thing to look at other than Shawn Layden 10 years ago, 8 years ago, whenever it was, where he talked about this very same thing, right? So not the quote word for word, but the idea was games are costing too much. Games are taking too long, and these budgets are growing, and we need to get back to the shorter games, the smaller games. And that was kind of just in a nutshell of what he said, but it's so true. And in terms of predicting where the industry needs to go, that's it. And I don't want to steal it. I kind of have, my own things to say about it, but I believe that, because where we're at, just to kind of put everything, out there, games that are costing 200, 250, 300 million, they have licensing, included. So making Spider-Man games, or EA, today issued the statement and talked about we're letting go of those licenses. So Marvel's a big one. Star Wars, right? Or Disney. So you're seeing it in real time. These games are costing way too much. It's not necessarily people's salary. You have to pay people. And I mean, you need a certain amount of people, I guess, to make a game. Certain things are unavoidable, okay? But what I think we've fallen into, or the industry has fallen into, is every game needs to be bigger than the game before. And I also think we're going to need some sort of mental shift. And follow me kind of through with this. I've said this for a while, okay? But I think people are eventually going to catch up. I really believe this. So for a while now, people have really put together, okay, the dollars that they spend on a game to hours. So $1 is 1 hour. So when you buy a game for it was 60, right? And then they increased the price to 70, which was a bad move, and it was a optically bad, kind of look for them. All right, $70. You have a lot of people out there that think $70 should equal 70 hours, and I think the industry did that to themselves because every game basically does that, right? Now, I do think games are probably going to need to drop the prices, and I know that sounds crazy because everything's going up and everything has gone up, historically, and their salaries go up, and these studios need more and more people, but that's where the problem is, right? Here's where I think the industry needs to go, and I said this actually in a tweet. We'll expand upon it here. The industry needs to go more AA. Okay, the AA space needs to grow. And I think this is happening. You've seen in the past year or two, a lot of veteran people, right, from different studios. You'll see posts on Twitter. Oh, they opened their own team. And oh, there's 50 people here. Oh, there's 75 people here. Oh, there's 100 people there. And they're making whatever game. And it might sound like a game or feel like a game that's very similar to games that these people have made in the past, right? That's what we've gotten. That is the future. In my opinion, that is the future. Now, again, it's not the entire future because there's always indies. There has been AA. There is AAA, and AAA is not going Actually, quite a bit of it is going somewhere, and it's nowhere, like it's going to end. But there will still be AAA around. But if there's anything that's going to expand in the coming years, it's the middle, it's the AA, and then actually would probably also be indies too, right? I bring up like Giant Sparrow quite often, Unfinished Swan, What Remains of Edith Finch, two of my favorite games ever. They're such good games, such a good team. You want to know how many people work at that team? 10 to 15 people. So small. They release a game every like 7 years. That's harsh. That hurts me because I want their games, but it's understandable because it takes a long time. But you know what? When you have 12 people working for you, you can take 7 years because guess what? Your salaries don't even come close to Sony, who's paying 400 people to work for 5 years to make a game. You think about those salaries in your head real fast, and you tell me which one's cheaper. And that's kind of the point. That's why I think it's going that way. So, again, you think about all these posts that we've seen of people opening up these smaller-ish teams. We need to get there. But like I said with the mind game thing, that we kind of have to convince ourselves, we need to bring that back. I really believe you look at games of the PS2 and Xbox 360 and PS3 and all that. You had games that were 10 hours long. Uncharted 2. A game looked at as a masterpiece, right? Uncharted 2. It had multiplayer, sure. Uncharted 2 is a $60 game. Takes about 8 hours. Could that work nowadays? I think the answer is probably no. And that scares me a lot, actually, because that is how it used to be, and I really don't think there was all that much wrong with it because, for me, it's always quality over quantity. Now, again, this is the only part that's kind of on us as the consumers. The rest of it is on them. The only thing we have to do is get past that mental hurdle. I truly believe that because I think those type of games are going to come back. The RoboCops, RoboCop just came out, this past year. Now it was technically a longer game, but that is kind of, I would say, the prototype or even stereotype. You think about what all of these games could be. Look at RoboCop, a game that definitely doesn't cost a lot, had a middle-sized team. You could tell the budget wasn't high based off, the game is not the most amazing it could possibly be. You give them 400 people, you give them 5 years, you would probably get a more polished game. But you know what? Sometimes raw is actually good, and I think you lose some of that the more people you have and the more years and the more kind of polished it is. Sometimes that raw feeling, which is actually quite good, it goes away. But RoboCop is a really good example of a game that has a mid-sized budget, mid-sized team, and you know what? That game was successful. It doesn't need to sell 5-10 million units to be successful. It could sell 1 or 2 and be good. You actually see this a lot from Japanese games. You see them celebrating. You see Atlas, you see Sega, I guess, at large. You see them celebrating that Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth or Persona 3 Reload sold 1 million. And here we are over here thinking, 1 million? You're celebrating that? You want to know why? They don't have as many people. It doesn't cost as much to make Persona 3 Reload. If Spider-Man 2 came out to celebrate 1 million, you laugh at them. You would say, what do you celebrate? You lost a boatload of money. You need to sell 10 million before you can even think about celebrating. Now they did. Okay, I'm not picking on Spider-Man, but you see the point here? It's a difference, I think, in I guess in that way, ideology, how these studios, how these businesses are constructed. The only thing we have to do, I think, is understand that in the years to come, it's going to be a whole lot more split. You might not get as many top tier. And when I say top tier, I guess I mean just that polish or what you consider to be the biggest of AAA games. I know Ubisoft, did the quadruple A thing. But when you think of a higher tier AAA game, you might have to bring down what you expect if you're thinking double A. But you know what? I really think that's the future. You got to kind of get past, okay, instead of 70 hours long, how about you accept a game that's 20 hours long? Now, it's not just shut up and accept, all the products. I'm not that kind of guy. Honestly, I'm not. I always say hey, it's your money. You spend it how you want to spend it. If you want or need a $70 game to satisfy you spending that money, that's completely on you. And I respect that. It's your money. It's not my money, right? So I've always kind of been on that. But I do think at large, we're going to have to kind of get back to quality over quantity. That's my big thing. I've talked about that before. I think most people are generally with me, but that's really, I think, where we're going to have to go. Where the industry is going to have to go is exactly as Shawn Layden said it. It has to stop. And we talked about this when Sony, we talked about this when in the Insomniac leak happened. And it's games can't cost $300 million anymore. They can't. And if they do, you're going to have extremely few of them. The issue with Sony, let's say like right now, you can look at EA, you can look at any of them. Let's say Sony, right? The issue is all of their big games that bring in all of this money cost so much to make, and that's why their net kind of margin thing that everybody's complaining about, 6, 7, 8%, whatever it is, it's so low because the games cost almost as much as they're making. Even though they're making legendary revenue, the games are costing more than they should by miles, and it kind of just equals out, which is a terrible way of running the business, and Sony knows that, hence why they're doing what they're doing. So that is gonna have to change. And again, where do I think that changes? Open up 6 50-person teams. And in those teams, you have them make a game every 2 to 3 years. And I think, and you could say, okay, well, Alex, 2 to 3 years isn't enough. No. You don't have it be a 70-hour game. You don't have it be a 100-hour game. You try to go back to the element of creativity. And I say that not trying to like pick on any specific thing, but what is the industry doing largely of the AAA space? They're going after trends. Everybody does live service. Everybody wants that bloated, big open world game. And yeah, some of them are really good. I love Horizon. I'm gonna get Final Fantasy. Like, I'll be playing it tonight. Like, so I'm not picking on, again, like maybe your favorite game or game style, but we have to get to a point where we focus, and I guess when I say we, I mean them. Again, for us, it's just buying or not buying whatever we feel like it, right? But for them, it's their, again, like ideology, how they do it. They need to get back to really creative hooks. What makes a game, like a Crash Bandicoot is playing over here. Like Crash Bandicoot, right? It doesn't need to sell if you have 50 to 100 people. You don't need it to sell 10 million, copies. And Crash Bandicoot isn't some 500-hour, epic adventure. It's platforming. It's difficult platforming at times. It's cool characters. It's cool, just a lot of different cool stuff, I guess, with Crash. You got to go back to those kind of details. What makes games special? Because making a game 100 hours and saying that's the special part, making a live and I know I've spent a long time on like this open world element or aspect. How about live service? Live service is a bubble that is absolutely bursting, like in the present time. You're seeing it happen, right? Not every studio can have their 5 live service games that are in the top 10 on Steam charts, considering you can't have that. There's only so many games that people are playing. There's only so much time in the day. I say this over and over. The biggest problem I think there is with live service, beyond like there's a lot wrong with it, the biggest thing to me in terms of like the fundamental flaw, there's only so many hours in the day, and there's only so many people playing these games. And so when every studio wants their big live service game, you are asking the same group of people to play your game every single day, all the time. The whole point of live service is to play it nonstop every day. That's the point. That is absolutely the point. So if you have 500 of those games and you're splitting one group of people, you cannot possibly have them all succeed. And that, to me, is the flaw. And I don't know why it hasn't been spoken more about. I mean, I'm not trying to boost my own ego, but why that hasn't been thought about more baffles. I just don't understand. I really, truly don't. So I think that live service bubble is popping. And again, going back to what I said kind of in the beginning, it'll still be around. Like, I'm not here to fearmonger. Like, oh, you're never going to get your next God of War game. Halo's done. It's shut down, all that stuff. It's not about that. What it's about, I think, is, again, this shift in the industry. Where we're at now and the types of games we get now is not going to be what it looks like in 5, 6, 7. Like, it really will not. Because these top of the line, I guess, because when I say it, I'm not really even talking about the quality. I guess I'm talking about the money and the effort and the time that goes into these games. It's going to be less. There's not going to be as many these kind of gigantic games. There's not going to be as many. The industry will survive. There's still so many people. I mean, we kind of have peaked in terms of how many people are playing games, but we only did that recently, like the last 2 or 3 years. There are so many, hundreds of millions of people that play video games. The people that played it when they were kids, they're now maybe my age. They're now maybe in their 40s, 50s, 60s. They're still playing games. They're not going to stop. Gaming is the best, in my opinion. It's the best. It'll never end. So what you're going to have is you're always going to have people that support it, but how it's broken in the industry or broken up in the industry, it's going to have to change. I think you're going to truly get back to, out of force. See, Sean Layden, I think, was saying it where it's like, hey, maybe we'd like to consider making games that are like 8 hours long again. Anybody want to do it? Can we like have a good idea? I feel like his was kind of like a pitch, like, hey, this is going to be forced on us eventually, but if we want to like voluntarily do this, we can do it kind of whenever. I think it's actually good to get ahead of the curve. I'd love to interview the guy because I hope, but I also think that's what he thought back in the day. Where we're at now you're forced. Now it's not even about, oh, if you feel like it, it's a suggestion. You can have 500 of these big 500-hour games. You get 500-hour games. Keep going. But maybe we should get to the mid-tier stuff. No, now it's okay. This stuff isn't working. Live service isn't working. Here's what we have to do. These companies act like they don't know what to do. Oh my God, I guess we just need more people to buy it. So instead of a game selling 10 million, they need to sell 12. And if they can't do 12, studios shut down. These studios or these companies, I should say, are that brain dead. The real answer is you can still have those, but you have less of them, and you just open up or downsize or whatever you want to do. You just have so many mid-tier ones, and guess what? You can still have just as many games released a year, right? More games come out now than ever before, period. More games come out now. You look back 10, 15 years ago, there's like 4 times the amount of games in any given month than what there was back in it's really that much bigger. That can still happen because what you can have is just smaller teams. In fact, you might actually get more games that come out because there'll be more studios. And guess what? They'll take 2 or 3 years to make instead of 5, 6, 7 years to make, right? When BioShock is taking 10 years to come out, how about if you made like 2 smaller BioShock games and they took 3 years each and they were cheaper and you didn't have to sell as much in order to make a profit? What if a BioShock game, instead of making 5 million units to make money, what if it only needed to sell 2? That's where I think we're going. I think that's where we have to go as an industry. And again, it's not by suggestion anymore. Now it's by force. But for the people like thinking this is the end of times, it is the end of part of the AAA space. And when I say part, I mean, again, for how big you think AAA is. Part of that is dying and is going to continue to die. And then at the end of the day, you're not going to have it be as big. And it's going to kind of trickle down. And I was thinking about this in my head. This is where I'll kind of leave it off. I mentioned these AA things. What I really, and these studios of these like industry veterans, what I think kind of needs to happen right now, you're seeing these thousands of people being laid off, right? When Deck 9 loses like 30 people and Sony fires 900 and Xbox 1900. What I think needs to happen literally today, which I imagine would be very hard to do, you need to have a couple veterans that were maybe also laid off open up like 7 to 10 teams right now. You have to find funding. I assume that's the hardest part, right? Like you have to get loans, and you're probably looking at loans in the 50 to 100 million range. Like you got to get a good amount of money. But if you just open up a couple teams that are 50 to 100 people, all these people being fired, instead of, and I guess here's where I'm going with it, instead of somebody being fired from Sony, let's say, right, or Insomniac, and they're looking for a job now at like a big Xbox team, they're looking for jobs at really big teams, which I imagine a lot of these people are, right? They kind of want to stay at the same level. Well, how about, and I'm not saying necessarily even a pay, reduction, in price. How about you open up 10, 50 people teams right there? That's 500, right? And you take from all of the people being laid off, you assemble some sort of almost, and I say this like actually with love, like this misfit, kind of thing, like the Island of Misfit Toys. These people that were let go of various studios, right, for whatever reason, and probably not performance-based, right? All these people, throw them together in a blender and have them come up with a brand new game with a 50-person team on a $50 million budget instead of $200 million, right? It's a quarter of the cost, and get the game out in 3 years from now. Can we do that? I think we can. I think the biggest issue is the funding, because you have to like put everything together. You have to get people, and you have to have the leaders willing to, I guess, take the risk to start off on their own. That's what we're seeing is all these, this lead person that was here, this lead person that was there, they started their own team. A lot of these people that are being let go, how many of them will want to, let's say, establish their own team? Some of them have it in them, some of them don't, and that's okay. You don't have to have that in you. You need those people, though. You need people to start up a team and get others, with them. So I don't know. That's my thoughts on it. The industry's changing. The industry will continue to change. I fear for it in one sense, but ultimately, if done right, it can actually be better. I truly believe it can actually be better, because I don't think and I've said this before. This is actually where I'll end the video. I do not think we're in the best place gaming has ever been. There's a lot of games out. There's still great games, amazing games, elite games that come out every single year. I think the best generations of games were, generations before. I do not think the PS5 and Xbox Series S and X gen, I think it's the weakest, maybe ever. And that is, again, I know I exaggerate. I think of the PS4 and Xbox One, I think that's a better generation. I think of the PS3 and 360, I think that is maybe the best generation. Now, it's what I grew up on. PS2 is often looked at as the best library of games ever, so you could probably say that one is better than right now. And then you can go PS1 and Nintendo, N64 and all that jazz. I believe this is one of, if not the weakest generations we've ever had. And I don't say that in saying that there's no good games. Look at my lists at the end of the year. I think there's probably 20 to 40 amazing games every year, okay? So I'm not one of these people saying, oh, there's no good games out. I think it's just the weakest. I think there were better generations before us. So it's not like we're living in this golden era. We were living in this, expansion era. Maybe we can get back to the good. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. I know this is a longer video. Some of you guys like the longer videos. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed, bell icon turned on. I hope to see you all on the next one.